Hi everyone, γεια σας και καλώς ήρθατε to another episode of Dimitra's Dishes. Today we're going to be making Stafidopsoma. Stafidopsoma are basically little raisin bread rolls that are so good for breakfast with some butter. You could put some cream cheese in them. They taste better than bagels if you ask me because they're softer, more tender. They're so easy to make with really basic and inexpensive ingredients. This recipe makes 10, but feel free to double it because once they're baked, you could freeze them in freezer-safe bags up to a month. Let's get started. We're going to begin with 1 cup or 250 milliliters of warm milk. You want it to be just lukewarm. I have half a cup of sugar or 115 grams. I'm just going to add a little bit of it, a couple tablespoons just to activate the yeast. 2.5 teaspoons of active dry yeast. And I'm going to add a little bit of the flour. I have 500 grams or about 3.5 cups of all-purpose flour. There are a few more things in here that I'll go over, but I'm just going to add about 2 tablespoons of the flour in here. Give it a mix. This is just going to help get the yeast started. You'll know the yeast is activated when a cloud forms on top of the mixture. If that doesn't happen, that means your yeast is bad and you don't want to continue making this. You want to get some good fresh yeast to make this with, otherwise the bread won't rise. So we're going to set that aside for about 8 minutes. So in the mixing bowl, like I said, I have 500 grams of all-purpose flour, minus a couple tablespoons that are in there, 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, a 1/4 teaspoon of cloves, these are ground cloves, and a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I'm just going to whisk that all up. Cinnamon and raisin go so well together, but if it's a flavor that you're not fond of, just leave it out. I'll just add the remaining sugar to this too. And once the yeast is activated, I'm going to add this to the mixing bowl with 4 tablespoons of unsalted butter that are at room temperature, or you could melt the butter. I'm also going to add a teaspoon of pure vanilla extract. Add the dough hook attachment to the machine, and then this is going to knead for 8 minutes. After that, I'm going to add a heaping cup, maybe a little bit more, of raisins, and then it's going to knead for another 2 or 3 minutes or until everything is incorporated. So these are raisin rolls, raisin bread rolls, so I added raisins, but you can definitely add cranberries to this. If you want to chop up some dates, you could add dates to this. There are so many fruits that now are sold dried and sweetened. Any of those will work, whatever your favorite is. I just feel like the raisins are traditionally in them, and they go so well with the cinnamon and the cloves, so that's what I'm using. I also go really heavy-handed with the raisins because we like lots of raisins in the bread. So once you're done kneading the bread, go ahead and transfer it to a bowl that's been greased with a little bit of olive oil. Toss the dough in there a few times so that way it's nice and coated and it'll rise evenly without making a layer on top. Cover the bowl with either a kitchen towel or some plastic wrap and set it aside in the warmest part of your house to rise. Now here in Texas, it's been 100 degrees. It's actually been 110 degrees almost every day. So my garage is actually the warmest place for this, and it takes about an hour and a half for the dough to rise just because it is a heavier dough. It can take up until 2 to 2.5 hours. You don't want to rush it. You want this to rise until it's doubled in volume. And before we move on, I also want to say that if you want to make this vegan or dairy-free for Lent or for whatever other reason, you can definitely substitute the milk for water. You can substitute the butter for some light olive oil or coconut oil, whatever oil that you choose to cook with or use. You can add it to this and it'll work perfectly in this recipe. But it is very important that you let the dough double in volume, otherwise it's going to be very dense. It's not going to be light. And you want the bread to be nice and light. They are going to be a little bit on the hardier side. These are not like turekia or brioches. They're not going to be very sweet and, you know, like that Danish type dough or the brioche type dough. These are going to be a little bit hardier, but that's how we like them. More like a bagel, but lighter. So keep that in mind. I'm going to set this aside until it's doubled in volume. Then we're going to move on to the next step. Okay, so you want the dough to double up in volume so that way the bread is nice and light. Transfer it to a clean work surface. At this point, just try not to fold it anymore. Shape it into a log. And this makes 10 rolls, so I'm going to cut it in half and cut each portion into 5 equal pieces, or as equal as I can get them. And you're not going to need any extra flour for this. Then you're going to take each one and just roll it using the palm of your hand into a ball. And then you can just take the bottom and pinch it together, just like that. I have 2 baking trays that are lined with parchment paper, and I'm just going to transfer the dough onto the baking trays. I'm going to do 5 in each one, so that way they bake evenly. I'll roll them first, and then I'll transfer them. See how easy that is? Once you're done forming the rolls, you're going to transfer them to your pans that have been lined with parchment paper. I like to put 5 per pan so that way they bake evenly. And now you're just going to cover them loosely with a kitchen towel, and you're going to set them aside until they rise, till they're almost doubled in volume again. Again, that step is important so that way they're nice and light. Once they've risen beautifully, you're going to brush them with some egg wash. The egg wash was simply made with 1 egg yolk and a couple tablespoons of milk. If you want to skip the egg wash, you can brush the tops with some olive oil or some butter. And I also like to sprinkle the tops with some granulated sugar for a little hint of sweetness, and then they're ready for the oven. The oven should be preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. If you're baking both trays at the same time, put one on the middle rack and one on the top rack, and then you're going to want to alternate them halfway through cooking. If you have 2 ovens, this is perfect. You can put each tray on the middle rack and let them bake for 20 or 25 minutes or until they're nice and golden. Once you tap them on the bottom, they should sound hollow. That's how you know they're ready. 25 is the longest you want to go. Don't go more than that, otherwise they'll dry out. If you underbake them a little bit, that's fine too, but don't go below 20 minutes. Every oven works differently, so keep an eye on it. That's the best way to know. But at 22 to 23 minutes is the sweet spot. Once they come out of the oven, you're going to want to let them cool completely. And at this point, they're ready to serve. You could serve them with some butter. Any butter will do, just plain old salted butter, which is my favorite. Or you can flavor the butter with jam or preserves or even some honey and just serve this for brunch. It's so good. These are good with a nice cup of coffee or tea. So comforting and delicious. Any leftovers, or if you made extra, once they're completely cooled down, you can transfer them into freezer safe bags, and they will keep fresh in the freezer for about a month. But who are we kidding? They're not going to last that long. As you can see, they're just so delicious. There's something so special about making homemade bread. The house smells amazing. It tastes so much better than store-bought, and it's so fresh and just so good. I hope you guys give this recipe a try. The exact measurements are on the website, dimitrasdishes.com. Let me know if you have any special recipe requests down in the comment section down below, and I'll get to them as soon as I can. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I'll see you all next time. Yes, us.